The Malcontentment Tango is a team of journalists, activists, and researchers with three key missions. A commitment to show an unfiltered view of the before, during, and after of key events, live as they happen. To defend the First Amendment, using our rights of a free press and to petition the government for redress of grievances, and to amplify the voices of underrepresented individuals, including Black, Indigenous, persons of color, and the LGBTQIA+ community. Our team is committed to seeking equality for all and holding those in power accountable. The easiest way to support us is to like and follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter, Periscope, Twitch, and Instagram. Thank you for supporting independent journalism and for being a malcontent. Good evening, malcontents. I am David, the Malcontent. Today is Thursday, December 10th, 2020, and welcome to the latest edition of the Malcontentment Happy Hour. I'm glad that you are joining us tonight. One comment I want to start off with out of the gate, having a problem with the chat client tonight. So the only comments that I'm going to be able to see are the comments that appear up on the feed on the screen in front of me, unfortunately. And actually, it looks like there may be a slight problem that I need to adjust, and I'm going to have to walk out of camera to do it. Who's the damn production engineer around here? You are! Oh, that's right. There, is that better? Do we not have a little black corner of the screen? We'll fix it in post. You can fix everything in post. All right, let's go ahead and get started. We're actually going to start. The reason you see me looking down is that we had a different batting order, but we have breaking news, like truly breaking news that I read 2 minutes ago. We were going to do this story, we announced that, but we're going to roll with this instead of as our number 5 story, our number 1 story. And story number 1 takes us to Portland, Oregon, and Red House. What we were planning to do tonight was actually explain the story behind Red House and why Red House has become a center of protest in Portland, Oregon. And we were going to start with that, but we're going to condense it down because we have breaking news out of Portland about Red House. So what's the story behind Red House? There is a family there, Black family, Indigenous family. They have lived in that home in Portland since the 1950s. They were subject to a predatory lender on a refinance, which happens so much in the BIPOC community, a story that we are actually rolling out tomorrow about that. We'll get into that at the end of the show. The home was foreclosed upon. They were evicted out of their home, and this happened in September. The property was sold at auction for $260,000. Now, you might think all of this is well and good, and they had what's coming to them. The property next door to them is valued at $10 million. And this is a neighborhood that has been subject to gentrification and is subject to the BIPOC community being pushed out of this particular neighborhood. Red House has always been a center of learning and meeting place. And what has happened is 3 or 4 days ago, Portland police came in force to essentially kick everybody out of that home and to proceed with this foreclosure and eviction exercise. 12 protesters were arrested. There was essentially a melee between the Portland Police Bureau and protesters. A protester was apparently struck by a vehicle, and Portland police eventually left. Protesters essentially took over. I say took over because that's in the interest of brevity. Several blocks. They have fenced that area off, essentially built some barricades. They've been doing press conferences. They have created a streamer jail. And they want the house to go back to the family. And that's what the gist of it is. Now, Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler, who has now probably replaced Jenny Durkan as the least popular mayor in the United States. The only reason for that is because Jenny Durkan has said, yeah, I'm done. I don't want any more of this. Forget, screw you guys. I'm going home. That's what Jenny Durkan had to say. Ted Wheeler then has probably replaced her as the least popular mayor in the country. Ted Wheeler basically said, go kick their asses. We are not going to let an occupied zone happen here in Portland. And the right-wing press and the chuds immediately started.
These are chuds.
Cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers.
Started clutching their pearls because remember, they don't live in fear, and that's why they don't wear any stupid masks. But they do fear Antifa, Black Lives Matter, unregulated uteruses, 5Gs, vaccinations, Bill Gates, Hugo Chavez, mail-in ballots, maybe the Tooth Fairy. We don't know. Anyway, I digress.
Chud. It's a cannibalistic humanoid underground dweller.
There are going to be a lot of chud buttons tonight. Here's the good news that's come out of there. Protesters set up a GoFundMe with the GoFundMe for the purpose of to buy the house back from the investor. That GoFundMe is up to $198,000, despite the fact that
Chud. Cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers
are trying to get that GoFundMe taken down. Obstinately, what the chuds are saying is that this GoFundMe is illegal because this is an illegal occupation and that's why the money should go away. So what's the punchline? What's the breaking news? Malcontent, get to it. The investor that is at the center of all of this, who bought this property in the first place at the rock bottom price of $260,000, and you better believe he was going to gentrify the crap out of that property, has announced tonight he would like to sell the property back. Now, I know some of you go, he should just give it back. He paid $260,000 for the property. If he's asking for a wash, because remember that the bank took that money. He doesn't have that money. Anyway, that's my view on it. And it looks like there's a finish line to this story here. So to the people that say protest doesn't work and action like this doesn't work and direct action doesn't work and you've accomplished nothing, it looks like they've accomplished something down in Portland tonight. And it's basically has been done in a very short period of time. And if Ted Wheeler and the Portland police actually stand back for a couple of more days, I have a feeling this will end in a very peaceful resolution. And with that, that ends story number one. And with that, now we're going to jump to story number two, which was originally story number one, if you're not confused yet. Hey, Mitch, I want to start off with this one.
You're not the same. I'm an American. You're a sick asshole.
You better believe it, Mitch. So Mitch McConnell tonight, what's the story here behind Mitch? There hasn't been a second stimulus package passed in the United States since the CARES Act, so ironically named CARES Act, was passed in the spring of 2020. Congress, the White House, Treasury has been trying to pass, obstinately trying, not trying very hard, but have been trying to pass another package since they passed the CARES Act. And there's been disagreements on both sides. Basically, Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, has been stonewalling any progress because he wants complete immunity to corporate liability for any deaths or illnesses related to COVID for people at work. Now, You may sit here and be going, well, I don't care about that because that doesn't impact me. It may not impact you today, but it could impact you tomorrow. See, here's the thing. The people that this is really going to impact right out of the gate is people that are in CPG and food manufacturing, consumer packaged goods and food manufacturing. These areas have been hotbeds of COVID spread. And if you take away and give blanket immunity to the corporations for this, you have essentially gutted over 110 years on progress on workplace safety in a stroke of a pen. Because it's COVID today. But then who's to say it doesn't become AIDS, or it doesn't become some other communicable disease, or it doesn't become, because the door is now cracked open, other issues in unsafe work environments, say like inhaling chemicals or inhaling smoke or being exposed to toxic substances. Because now you have created the door to systematically start gutting OSHA and protections that were established by the Teddy Roosevelt administration. No, not the World War II Roosevelt, the going up San Juan Hill Rough Riders, where we get the name teddy bear from, Teddy Roosevelt, because he was the individual, Republican, by the way, he's a very fascinating person in U.S. history. He is the individual that gave us the National Park Service. He is the individual that took on like Standard Oil and U.S. Steel and broke them up into itty bitty pieces. He is the individual that gave us workplace safety. He is the foundation of OSHA, really comes all the way back to Teddy Roosevelt. And this is really just an attempt to gut this and to decrease workplace safety. And you may be going, well, I'm not a factory worker. What if you're a mechanic at a garage? What if you work at a construction site? This is this, right? And then what happens if you provide that blanket immunity? And let's say today there is some chemical that we don't know is bad for you. And you're in construction and you're inhaling or getting exposed to that chemical. And 20 years from now, people are dropping dead from leukemia or stomach cancer or lung cancer or from melanomas because of the contact that they got on there. Who is it to say that then some politician doesn't go, well, there was blanket immunity for workplace illness for this, so this should also apply in legal principle. The bottom line is this. Mitch McConnell is not going to let anything pass. It doesn't matter that 853,000 Americans filed for unemployment last week. The reality is that the job growth that has been going on in this country has ground to a halt. At 853,000 people applying for unemployment last week, if anything, the numbers are now going backwards. We are losing jobs. The other thing we know, because this came out, the Trump administration's been cooking the books on the unemployment numbers, which is mind-blowing, and it is mind-blowing that this is not getting the coverage that it deserves. Here's a couple of things that happen. If the CARES Act is allowed to expire on December 31, millions of Americans will be kicked off of unemployment. Well, so what? Because by the U3 unemployment number, they'll no longer count. So what will happen is, come the January unemployment numbers, they will look very rosy because you kicked millions of people off of unemployment, even though they're still unemployed. Then come February, the numbers will look terrible. Who's going to be president in February? Oh, that's right, Joe Biden. So we're already setting up to make everything Joe Biden's fault on January 20th at 12:01 p.m. That's number one. Here's the number two part of this, and this ties back to Red House. There is a $2.5 trillion transfer of wealth that is getting ready to happen in this country, and Mitch McConnell is the ringmaster behind it, and it starts on January 4, 2021. The only power left that Nancy Pelosi has to do anything before this CARES Act expires is to let this 1 week package that prevents the government from shutting down for a week expire, and to essentially shut the government down. That is the only thing they have left. And to shut the government down in the middle of a pandemic, of course, the Republicans will blame Nancy Pelosi for that. But you know, and I know, and they know, and Mitch knows that he's the one as the puppet master and playing on the chessboard. So thank you, state of Kentucky. Thank you so much for reelecting Mitch and putting us as a nation in the position of losing hundreds of thousands of more small businesses, experiencing hundreds and thousands of more deaths, and putting millions of more Americans into poverty. Because in doing that, Mitch might move that $2.5 transfer of wealth up to $3 trillion or $3.5 trillion. And guess how much money, cash, leafy greeny money, that hedge funds, investors, and corporate America have sitting on the sidelines, just waiting to invest in something. That's right, $3.5 trillion. You'll be able to read that story tomorrow afternoon. I know we've been promising that story for a week. The news cycle has been crazy, and that story got pushed out because of a number of things. And with that, we're going to roll our first commercial.
Black Coffee is a hub for communities and a hub for meeting people, making friends, and understanding.
What Black Coffee is to me is a place to actually call home, a place where Black youth will feel welcomed, where Black families will come and feel like they're at home.
What we're trying to build is more than just coffee. Community is something that we do naturally. We know who's in the community, we know what the deficits are, and we're trying to fix that. We want to bring people together.
My hope is that the phrase grounded in excellence shows up everywhere and that it becomes a movement.
I'm looking forward to hanging out at Black Coffee with my friends and feeling safe.
Black coffee to me means opportunity for people like me and my other friends and family to come here and do homework safely and hang out and stuff like that.
That is happening. It is happening.
Black Coffee Northwest, located in Shoreline, Washington. They have special holiday hours, 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday, and I believe 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. on Saturday. Get the potato scones. Oh my God! The potato scones are so good. And with that, and one other thing on Black Coffee. Black Coffee is hosting a Zoom webcast. We will call it a webcast. On Sunday, it's actually from noon to 6, and they're going to be highlighting over 30 Black-owned businesses over this 6-hour webcast that really should be deserving your attention and your dollars this holiday season. And with that, we are going to have me pause again to play engineer. Who's running the show? Fly-by-night operation. I'll tell you, it's the last time I buy a coach ticket. Is that better? There's a story behind it. Don't worry. Just don't worry about it. And actually, I probably could have just left it, and I would have probably been the only person that noticed that. All right, with that, let's restart. Rashi, I'm going to give you a nice clean point to edit the video when we do this in post. Okay, here we go. There's your clean point. And with that, we're going to go ahead and move to our number 3 story, which is actually our number 2 story for the night. And with that, let's roll the intro. We had talked about this issue on the Monday show, and unfortunately, as one follower on Twitter said, I guess you were right. This is something there are many situations where people go, gee, you were right. And I go, I really didn't want to be right. And this is one of them. I didn't want to be right on this situation, but here we are. And with that, we're going to roll some clips.
Early Tuesday, 9 Nazi swastika stickers were found placed across the Anne Frank Human Rights Memorial in Boise.
Peter Yeager faces a first-degree arson charge and is expected to appear in court today.
Can I interrupt you for just a moment? My 12-year-old son is home by himself right now, and there are protesters banging outside the door, okay? I'm going to go home and make sure he's okay, so I will reconnect with you when I get there.
There's been one person detained, but they indicated that they have the situation under control.
Sadly, it's not under control. It is not under control at my house, and it's not under control at Diana's house.
Daniel Troublefield took these pictures at the hospital right after he says he was attacked.
I curled up in the fetal position, and I was just ready to die.
He shared
Are you proud of yourselves, America? That mother clip in particular is very hard to watch. Now, the Chuds.
Chud. It's a cannibalistic humanoid underground dweller.
These are Chuds. Cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers.
The Chuds are trying to spin it that they were actually engaged in peaceful protest in Boise, Idaho. And as sometimes we're very fond of saying and quoting the song "Killing in the Name of," some of those who work forces are the same who burn crosses. In that conversation in the Boise Health District meeting, where they are saying they say they have it under control. Who are they? Well, you know who they are. They're bastards. To quote South Park. Yes, they was the police department saying that they had things out of control. The mayor, things were so well under control, according to the Boise Police Department, that the Boise Police Department a couple of minutes later in that call said, yes, you need to cancel this meeting, and the mayor is asking you to cancel this meeting because there's over 100 people outside and it is no longer safe for us being the police, and it's no longer safe for you. That is on the clip. That is available, the full-length clip of that. It's at the end of that. So yeah, Boise Police Department, it wasn't under control. And Chuds, you weren't being peaceful protesters. You just weren't. And then we have the swastikas on the Anne Frank memorial. It's the only Anne Frank memorial in the United States. Wasn't aware of that. I learned that in part of researching that story. And the other part that makes it even a little more reprehensible, it happens the day before Hanukkah, because of course it does. But these people come in the middle of the night because they're cowards, and they consistently act as cowards because that's how they operate. And every now and then you get somebody like Chris Gunzler. Chris Gunzler, by the way, still cooling his jets at the Thurston County Jail. Nobody has stepped forward to pony up his $5,000 bail. Or Chris Gunzler.
Chud. Cannibalistic, humanoid, underground dwellers.
Chris Gunzler is the epitome of the Chud that I like to talk about. Chris Gunzler lives with mom and dad at 27 years old. So literally an individual who shit posts from mom and dad's basement, who inhaled too much hate, too many comments, and got pushed a little too far. And we know that his comrades in arms literally did not and do not support his actions. Why? Because when he pulled the trigger and fired that shot on Saturday, it wasn't just Antifa that scattered and ran. The camera don't lie. Everybody scattered and ran, and everybody stopped the fight that was going on both sides. And the camera doesn't lie. Right-wingers and left-wingers were cowering in fear behind parked cars together. And all of a sudden, it all didn't matter. And so Chris Gunzler is like the epitome of this. And so, yes, the brave protesters are pounding on the door and threatening a 12-year-old child that's at home. Yes, but you went to people's houses. Yeah, you know what? Nobody ever walked up to Mike Solin's door. Nobody ever pounded on the door. No one brought a gun. Nobody threatened anybody with harm. And nobody did it knowing that the parent would be away from the child. Because don't forget, the protesters coordinated this. They knew where the people were going to be at that meeting. So don't pretend that, oh no, we're peaceful, because you're not. Now let's go ahead and we're going to go to Spokane, and let's talk about this interesting incident out there. Peter J. Yeager, we had figured out he was the individual arrested, but we were looking for confirmation, probably like every other media organization. We put on our Twitter feed. We're pretty sure we know who this is. We identified it through arrest records. The thing that we're having a really hard time finding that, we could not find a Peter Yeager, like when we were doing search of the existence of a Peter Yeager, anywhere in the area. There were a couple of people came up in social media when we were looking on there, but like, when we looked at their profiles, it was like, this doesn't fit the profile of a person that goes in alleging that they're going to blow a building up and set a fire and take somebody hostage. I use the word hostage. He held one person against their will. That is the allegations that are coming out of that. He has been charged with first-degree arson. First-degree arson is basically, there are a number of ways you get first-degree arson, but one of them is setting a building on fire when you know that people are in the building. Oh, that's right, chuds.
These are chuds.
Cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers.
That's another one you like to get real high and mighty on, right? We don't do that. Oh, okay, whatever. So, what do we know? He's from Grand Coulee, Washington. We don't know his age. We also know that he claims that he has no political affiliation. Full stop. The FBI is investigating this as a domestic terrorism attack. He claims that he hates Republicans and Democrats equally and that he hates the elites. Kind of starting to sound like a Q follower to me. And he wanted to just do something so that other people would do something. That's just about his words. So in other words, he didn't say things like, I want to create a revolution or I want to start a race war. He never said anything like that. He gave a manifesto to the person he was holding against their will. The police have that manifesto. We don't know a whole lot about the manifesto beyond what we've just said. He appears to have no social media footprint. Not only does he appear to have no social media footprint, he is probably does not live, say, at a residence that he has a lease on or that he physically owns. Because in social media, in address search, property search, nothing comes up for a Peter J. Yeager when you do this search. And there was one of the things we wanted to make this clear, and we did this on our Twitter channel. In the Spokane area, there's a guy who was a Jeffrey Yeager, and it was like, look, we don't want anybody going down this rabbit hole because Jeffrey Yeager has a talk show and he's an author. He's written all these books about frugal living, and it's like, it ain't that guy. We know it's not that guy. Don't start going down that rabbit hole. We have an age. I just saw the comment going by. So he's age 45. And yes, he is a war vet from the Iraq War. He claims that he has PTSD. That's what we know at that point. The last clip that we showed there is out of Ocean Shores, where the individual with the smashed in face there confronted a couple of people in a store who weren't wearing a mask. Now, they shouldn't have been in the store in the first place not wearing a mask, but neither here nor there. And let's not forget, back in the spring, when people were, oh, okay, I could still go to parks, and there was all this arguments in the socials that was like the going to the park doesn't mean like 30 of you go to park and hang out together. Going to a park means you keep walking and keep moving and keep a part of each other. And people are like, no, they said we can go to a park. And there was like, if the governor says we can play soccer, so why can't I play basketball? Or why can't I play football? And why can't my kids be on the jungle gym? Right? We went all through this in the spring. And the folks at Ocean Shores were very, very upset when everybody from Seattle, Tacoma, and Bellevue showed up at their doorsteps in April because the governor said we can go outside again. I think end of April is kind of when all that happened. And it turned into the shit show that everybody thought it was going to be. But now they're cool with not wearing masks because, they listen to Dear Leader, soon not to be Dear Leader, and they don't live in fear. Yet somehow they have to take a gun to go to the store, and they're afraid of vaccinations, 5G, unregulated uteruses, Hugo Chavez, voting machines, vaccinations, Bill Gates, government overlords. They're afraid of those things. Taking my guns away. They just scared little sheep. Well, what did they do? Well, they did what any normal, rational human being would do after being told to wear a mask in a store. And the person admits that he was confrontational about it. He could have been a little more polite. They kicked his ass in the parking lot. And what's the police doing there? Not a whole hell of a lot, because apparently kicking somebody's ass for telling you to wear a mask is acceptable in Ocean Shores. Hey, Seattle, come this spring and summer, remember that when you're going to go take your tourist dollars somewhere. Because let's face it, Ocean Shores has a pretty beach, but Ocean Shores has straight up lousy restaurants. Lousy. Like, we don't have to try, number one. And number two, most of the accommodations there are pretty lousy and really overpriced for what you get. So, you know, economic pressure, look what's happening at Red House. See, I tied that together. Economic pressure, that's a language that people do understand. And so maybe the police would be a little more motivated to do something. But it's unlikely, because remember in Woodinville, when we had Gunny McGunnister,
Chud. It's a cannibalistic humanoid underground dweller,
waving his gun around the juveniles and King County sheriffs, because technically there is no Woodinville Police Department. They contract with the King County Sheriff's Department. They decided, like, and yet we've never heard what the mystery fluid in that bucket is. And yet I seem to believe that if the mystery bucket of fluid had some dangerous chemical in it, or was filled with human feces and urine, we would have heard about that, because that's how they roll. And with that, we're going to roll to our second commercial.
Music has a power greater than words can really express. Some birds sing a song to me. Let me know where I'm supposed to be. It's such a shame, yeah. Well, I was your TV girl. The EP is called Blue, and my website is classicelishamusic.com.
And we're back. This would be a good time to remind viewers on a couple of things. First of all, Classic Elijah, you can go to our website and you can actually get a CD there with a bonus track. It's $15. Or you can go to Bandcamp or iTunes. If you have an iPhone, it's literally a push of a button to download A Voice of an Angel, great music, and a wonderful, wonderful young woman who is working on her full-length studio album. And we're really hoping that when she drops her first track, that we can bring her virtually into the studio and share that. This would be a good time to show your appreciation to our moderators. And the way that you show your appreciation to our mods and admins is, if you're watching on Periscope or you're watching on Facebook, spam those hearts. Blow up those hearts. Let them know you appreciate the great work that you're doing. If you're on Twitch, you could just write a bunch of hearts and hit send, and then they see those hearts, because I know there's no way to go, yay, hearts, and do that. The other thing is, my social media manager says I need to do this more, and I just have to get in the comfort zone in doing this. In order to support independent media and keep us independent and do all this, because this isn't free, if it's in your heart, you could Venmo us, or you can do Patreon and become a patron. And we have Patreon as low as $5 a month. And $5 a month actually got to go a long way for us, especially if we had a lot of people just doing $5 a month. And then our commitment will be to continue to bring this. Through the generosity of our viewers, we are, from a technology cost standpoint, so just things like internet, phone, like the real basic technology, we're just about to break even. So I'm not burning cash anymore. We're almost like neutral. We're close. Anyway, we would appreciate that support. And after that plug, let's go to story number 4, which is actually story number 3 tonight.
The U.S. Marshal's office confirmed just about 30 minutes ago that the suspect involved in this afternoon shooting has died. They say that a deputy commanded the suspect to drop his weapon before he ultimately pulled the trigger.
Tonight, the coroner in Columbus, Ohio, says preliminary autopsy results show Casey Goodson was shot multiple times over the weekend, mounting anger.
And he deserves better. His family deserves better, and they deserve justice.
Well, Carrie, I can tell you one of the people I spoke with today was Sheriff Dallas Baldwin. He was very hopeful that the state would take over this investigation, but just within the last couple of minutes, the state says they will not accept this case. A BCI spokesperson saying this decision comes as a result of not knowing why so much time passed.
There were a lot of questions about who will handle the investigation into Casey Goodson's death. We now know Columbus Police, along with the U.S. Attorney's Office, will investigate.
I actually hit the cut button on there a little too soon. Apologies for that. So let's talk about the case of Casey Goodson out of Columbus, Ohio, because this case really stinks. And as we unpeel this rotten onion, it stinks more and more. The story, as we understand it, is this. The U.S. Marshals were on a warrant, arresting a fugitive on a warrant. And there were sheriff's deputies that were in support of the U.S. Marshals. We know because we hear this story over and over and over again. They allege that Casey Goodson drove by and flashed a gun while the police were there after being done with their fugitive investigation. Full stop. Casey Goodson, what do we know about him? We know he's 23 years old. He has no criminal record. Not only does he not have a criminal record, he is a concealed carry permit holder. So the bar, right? The bar is higher than just a generic did not get into trouble. We can probably safely assume that he did not have any mental health history, did not have any drug history. By all reports, he has never been in trouble. He has been a good individual. He was coming back from a dentist appointment, and it was probably, we can conclude, probably just like a general teeth cleaning. Why can we probably conclude that? Because he was carrying some Subway sandwiches to bring home to eat. And generally, if somebody has had a root canal or filling or is high on drugs, as chuds,
Chud. It's a cannibalistic humanoid underground dweller.
May try to attempt to go, well, this is why this happened this way. None of this fits. So a 17-year on duty sheriff, 17-year of experienced sheriff's deputy, of course he has to go because he flashed a gun. Casey Goodson is literally walking into his house. He is told to drop the gun. He doesn't drop the gun. And Casey Goodson is shot 3 times. Now, they say he's been shot 3 times in the abdomen in the news. This is what officials say. By all reports, he was shot 3 times in the back. That is by the people who witnessed the shooting, which is his cousin and grandmother who were in the home that saw the shooting happen. Yes, Casey Goodson was essentially executed in front of his grandmother. Oh, and there's one other problem with this whole story. His family says Casey Goodson wasn't carrying a gun. They say he was carrying a Subway sandwich. Now, the police department have not been very forthcoming, and we know that because multiple investigating sources have been saying they haven't been very forthcoming. So far, they have not released any body cam video. What a shock on that. They have released the 911 calls, and the 911 calls all go, somebody just tried to break. The first 911 call from the cousin basically is somebody just tried to break into the house and they have shot my cousin, which indicates to me that the sheriff's deputy may have been plain clothes. We don't know that, but they did not say police just shot our cousin for no reason. It was like some dude just broke into our house and just shot my cousin. You need to get somebody out here. The other thing is that the police have strategically said, well, we did find a weapon, but of course they didn't say where the weapon was or, where they found the weapon. Now, if Casey Goodson was a concealed carry holder and say he had that gun safely concealed carried in a holster, well, of course the police are going to find a gun on his dead body, right? But this is why the state of Ohio has said, oh, no, we're not investigating this. The reason they're not is because they said it took so long before investigators said, maybe something's a little rotten with this. We should hand this off. And the state of Ohio is going, you've already screwed this investigation up. We're not going to take the fall on it. So guess who's going to investigate? Yeah, the Columbus Police Department. They're going to investigate a police shooting that happened in Columbus, Ohio. Let me guess what they're going to decide. It was totally justified. You know it, I know it, they know it, because that's how it rolls. That's why Black Lives Matter. That's why an accomplice and more than an ally. Because we know how this is going to play out. The FBI has moved in, and they're going to work with the city of Columbus in a possible civil rights violation in his killing. But of course, we know how those investigations typically play out, and that is going to be probably a big, fat nothing burger. Too many names. And tonight in Seattle, there was a candlelight vigil that started at 6:30 for Casey Goodson. This has to stop. Too many names, too many people. Casey Goodson's crime right now appears to be getting his teeth cleaned or having a dentist appointment and picking up a Subway sandwich. And with that, we move to our next story. I'm pushing the buttons too fast. Let's try that again. And now we're going to move on. Rashi, I'm doing this just for you. In 3. And now we're going to move on to the next story. Okay, can I push the button? Can I push the button now? Is it okay? All right, I'm going to push the button. We can have a little fun with this, right? It's live production. I don't have a production engineer. I got to do all this stuff. Do you know when this show was like loaded up into the computer ready to go tonight? 8:58 p.m. The show was loaded on the system at 8:58 p.m. And like literally at 8:58 and 30 seconds is when I read the information about Red House and the investor offering essentially to sell the house back and the $198,000 raised on the GoFundMe so far. So anyway, now we're here to story number, I don't even know what number it is. Nikhila Rice is a figure that maybe a lot of people may not be familiar with her name if you're not in protest circles. Certainly not a name, say, like Trey or TK or Payday. But Nikhila has been everywhere this summer. And we have had the pleasure of working with her. And we've talked to her multiple times about, we would love to have you come on the show. And Nikhila has been working on kind of operating out of her comfort zone. And we had a wonderful interview with her today. And with that, I get to catch my breath for a few minutes, and we're going to play part of the interview that we had. We will play a second part of this next week, and then we will release the entire interview that we had. It's almost 20 minutes. We release the entire interview. We're going to roll that out tomorrow. And so with that, let's roll that interview. Welcome to another interview with Malcontent News. My name is David. I am the Malcontent, and we are here with Nikhila Rice. Nikhila, how are you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing great. Just, recovering from the months before and just getting everything recuperated and relaxing in December. How are you doing?
Nikhila, I'm doing great. And thank you so much for asking. That's really nice of you. You've really been involved behind the scenes in a lot of activity in the Black Lives Matter movement in the Puget Sound region. Why don't we start by having you talk a little bit about some of the things that you have done behind the curtain?
Well, I've done a few things in the last few months, from leading protests in the East Side, helping co-organize the Black Joy Festival, doing protests in Seattle, having sit down and listen events. Also, that's what I specialize in now, and just supporting the community.
I know in preparing for this interview, you and I talked a little bit. You were involved with the Engage team. You and a couple other people taking a self-care break. You're doing a little bit of a step back. Tell us about why you're taking that self-care break, and why is self-care in the protest community so important?
I am taking a self-care break because I haven't had one in the last 6 months. I've been out protesting since June and trying my best to support, and it is taxing. It is completely taxing, to the point where some, even myself, just thought about just stopping protesting, stopping whatever it is that we're doing for the community, and just fully focusing on myself. I think that it's really important to take, at least a month off, 2 weeks off, or whatever you feel comfortable with, to really understand why we're out here.
I know that you've had a really interesting journey over the last 6 months. You've been involved in a lot of different things. Let's talk a little bit about Black Joy.
I co-organized the Black Joy Festival with an amazing woman, Brianna Janae. She actually is the one who is the founder of the Black Joy campaign, and she had this idea because it was needed. It was needed in the Black community, something that was focused just on happiness, supporting Black vendors and performance people that we knew in Seattle and the Seattle area. From the poets to performance to us selling out basically from all the vendors, it was a amazing success.
You had a number of dancers that were there and other entertainers who identify in the trans community, that identify as trans. And I know that the Engage team has deep connections with the trans community, because at many of the events that they are involved in, there are people that entertain from the trans community. Tell us a little bit about those relationships and why the trans community needs so much representation and support.
The reason why we had so many performers, especially dancers and ballroom performers, is because they are a part of our community, especially the Black community, when it comes to trans lives. Trans Black women and men are the highest, in the highest rate of murder and so many other things. And I believe, and so does the team of the Engage team and Black Joy campaign, think of supporting them, of paying them what they deserve, and giving them the spotlight to do whatever they want with their creativity and show people what Black Joy is from all spectrums. And I think that's why we're so connected with that community, because without them, we wouldn't have a lot of things. And I feel like everyone should know that, from just the point of view of support when it comes to community building. So yeah.
I know that you've done a lot with these sit down and listen series. What was the impetus for you to do that and bring those messages to the East Side?
I started this because it was needed. On the East Side, you don't get those protests. You don't get the news reporting what's going on, because yes, we have a smaller population, but we also are on the East Side, one of the most wealthiest in Washington, actually. And I felt like there needed to be something done. I had council members come to me wanting to get my opinion on a few things in Kirkland, and I actually spoke at a meeting that they had. And basically, they let all the Black folks speak first on what they felt needed to be addressed, but we only had 2 minutes to speak. 2 minutes is never enough. So I took it on my half to get more than that, to have people come out and speak of what they thought was most important, and amplify their voices and tell the community, hey, this is happening, this is my truth. So with Eastside Embrace doing all these things, trying to amplify Black voices in our community, we have supported so many people, from Black Coffee Northwest to the Alley League, and from poets to organizers who would do the protest in Seattle, to organizers who run and do the protest on the East Side. Their voices matter, and I felt like they needed this, they needed their own time. where it wasn't just at a protest. I wanted this to be a safe space for them, and I will always continue to have a safe space and work with them doing that. Yeah.
And I think it's worth noting that you've been doing sit down and listens, even in the age of COVID, that as the infection rates increased, you moved those into a virtual environment.
Yes, because of COVID, I wanted it to be safe for everyone, especially in the Black community, and how high the rates are for Black folk for COVID. So I thought those Zoom calls would bring more people in, not just from the East Side, but all over the Northwest, and just to expand the viewing of it to get more support.
What is one thing that you really wish that the non-BIPOC community would understand that they don't understand?
I wish that the non-BIPOC community would understand is that we're not a threat. We are people just like everyone else who still needs support, who still needs allies and comrades standing behind us when we want our voices heard and to amplify them, to push harder and continue doing the work, and really believe in our truths when we tell you this is wrong, and not to judge them because you don't personally understand it.
Nikhil, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate you sharing your journey with us. I believe that we will see a lot more of you behind the scenes as we get into spring and summer of 2021. And is there anything special that you're doing during your self-care break?
Thank you so much for having me. And I definitely, hopefully, will see you soon out in the streets when COVID is not as strict, hopefully. So yeah, take care.
So in part of the editing process, Nikhila does answer what she's doing for the self-care, but in the interest of keeping that interview for 5 minutes, think of that as a little bit of a teaser that you'll have to either come back on Monday or you'll have to watch the full-length video to find out what she is doing to self-care. Nikhila is an amazing young woman. She is so humble. And I know that she is working with a number of people in the Black Action Coalition and also working with the Engage team. And she has stepped back, as a couple other of them have, because burnout among protesters is very, very real. You are just on and on and on and on. And I have expressed a number of times when crushing things have happened, you know, the night after, I remember Juneteenth. Juneteenth is really etched in my mind because there was a number of us working on a documentary. We were fanned out because there were so many things going on in Juneteenth. And we had caught just all of this amazing video. And there was a lot of joy on that day. And things at CHOP were starting to get a little, but things were good. I remember it, like at the end of the night, it was pretty late. And we were all kind of like, wow, this was a really good day. And then Lorenzo was shot and killed and murdered in CHOP that night. And this is like every day for the Black community. And the first couple of months where I would experience just this crushing low, and I'm like, and I just wanted to curl up in a ball and cry. And then I'm like, oh, this is the experience of Black America. This is every day, day after day after day. And they continue to function. And I don't know how they do it. I really don't, because white America wouldn't put up with it. And Black America shouldn't have to put up with it. Nikhila also is known, particularly in the community around here, because of the sit down and listen sessions that she does. And that'll be part of the interview that we will play on Monday. And some of those sessions were done as Zoom meetings. And so recordings are available for that. With that, we're going to roll our next commercial. The Malcontentment Tango is a team of journalists, activists, and researchers with 3 key missions. A commitment to show an unfiltered view of the before, during, and after of key events, live as they happen. To defend the First Amendment, using our rights of a free press and to petition the government for redress of grievances. And to amplify the voices of underrepresented individuals, including Black, Indigenous, persons of color, and the LGBTQIA+ community. Our team is committed to seeking equality for all and holding those in power accountable. The easiest way to support us is to like and follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter, Periscope, Twitch, and Instagram. Thank you for supporting independent journalism and for being a Malcontent. And we're back. And with that, I would like to ask again, if you're watching the show, this is a good opportunity to spam those hearts on Periscope, Twitter, and Facebook, and let the moderators know that you appreciate, and our admin team, all of the work that they do. There's over 20 people that support me. I am the face of Malcontentment Tango, but there are writers and researchers and people that you don't see. Well, you see Renee every now and then, but the rest of the team you generally don't see. And we're working on seeing more, and we're talking to some people about potentially growing the team more. Again, because my social media manager says, like, you got to do more of this. So I'm going to do a little more of it. I got to get in my comfort zone. We want to stay as independent media. We don't want to have to put ads on the website. When we hit 10,000 followers, I really don't want to go, yes, Facebook, I would love for you to start rolling ads on our videos. Because gross. And let's not forget, that puts money in Zuckerberg's pocket at the end of the day. If you like independent media, if you like what we're doing here, help keep us independent. You can do that by doing a Venmo or becoming a patron. And we will be announcing a little fun thing that we're going to be doing with patron subscribers. I guess we could call it a subscription. And as little as $5 will get you into the little something fun that we're going to be doing through the holiday season. I have to make a little video, and it's just, there's only so many hours in the day to get into it. But if you're already a patron, don't worry, you're signed in for that. If you become a patron tonight, don't worry, you're signed in for it too. So there's no like sign up at this point. Now, we're not doing that because that would be crappy of me to go hint, hint, wink, wink, and then go, oh, but you signed up too early. And with that, we're going to move to our last story of the night. ICU capacity on the brink. The state of Washington, there's a lot of news coming out in regards to COVID in the state of Washington, including some breaking news that's actually come out while the show has been going on. And that information was feeded to me. Thank you so much. That's why I say there's a great team that you don't see behind me. Some information was fed to me at Feeded. Feeded is not a word. Fed to me.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it.
I'm allowed to self-burn every now and then, right? Feeded. I know some chud's going to be like, Malcontent can't speak English. He said feeded. There's also probably some chud out there going, feeded's a word. Fed. Information that was fed to me. I shouldn't be laughing on such a grim topic, but I guess we need a little levity here. A couple of things that are going on. Yesterday, the state of Washington set a grim milestone, and that grim milestone is not 3,000. We're going to get into that. It's not 3,000 Washingtonians who have died from COVID. And some of you right now will be going, yes, they did. No, and I'll get into that in just a second. That's part of the breaking news. But 49 Washingtonians died yesterday from COVID, which is a record number of Washingtonians. It is more single-day deaths than we've had at any point in this pandemic that it continues to go on in this state. The state of Washington lowered total state fatalities by 166 earlier today, bringing the total number down to, I believe, 2,850. If it's like 2,852 or something, don't get all, It's like 2,850. Don't have people here holding a sign up going, you got it wrong. I love that. But COVID. The reason they brought the number down is that they research each of the fatalities that are attributed to COVID. And if they find that COVID was not one of the factors, then it's taken out, right? Because this is where the chuds...
Chud. Cannibalistic, humanoid, underground dwellers.
Go see, they're cooking the books. They're cooking the books because you die in a car. They die in a car crash. They posted this for the COVID in the hospital. They say they died from COVID. They didn't die from COVID. They died from a car crash. Yeah, the state of Washington goes through and audits those deaths. And even though the person, say, was COVID positive when they showed up in the emergency department with bones sticking out of their body and bleeding to death, on the information on the medical records was car crash, COVID positive. But then they go through and investigate and go, oh no, they didn't die from the COVID. They died from the car crash industries. Oh, and by the way, cardiac arrest is not a cause of death. Cardiac arrest is what kills everybody. I've heard people go, they put the cause of death as cardiac. Everyone dies of cardiac arrest. Literally, that's what kills you. Your heart stops beating, you die. You go, what if you get your head cut off? Your heart will stop beating very, very shortly after your head has been cut off, and you will die. That's the end of it. Oh my God. Guys are killing me. Anyway, that's why 166 have been backed out. Tonight, grim news coming out of the United States. More Americans have died from COVID-19 than all of the combat deaths in World War II. Now remember, combat deaths in World War II are from December 7th, 1941 to August 11th, 1945. We are talking from beginning of February, late January, because I know there's a couple of deaths in California that were attributed to COVID. I think the first one was like January 21 or January 22 to December 10. So less than a year. More Americans have died. And we are on a trajectory right now that as we cross the 1-year milestone of COVID coming to the shores, we could be at 400 or 425,000 dead Americans. If you project those numbers out into the summer, even with vaccination distribution, we may rival the 1918 flu pandemic, which is estimated 675,000, because they didn't keep daily records there, and they didn't have the capability to do a flu test because they didn't even they knew viruses and bacteria, but they didn't have tests for them, and nobody had seen a virus yet because there was no microscope capable of seeing a virus in 1918. Stop being so pedantic. Let's get into those ICU numbers. In Everett, Washington, Providence Hospital, they are at 100%. Here in Kirkland, according to the New York Times, Evergreen Hospital is at 90%. Overlake Hospital in Bellevue is at 64%. See, there's no problem. They're at 64%. They're at 64% because they have no staff. They have a severe staffing shortage problem at Overlake because they don't have enough staff to begin with, and a number of their staff members are sick. Harborview Medical Center has more COVID patients today than they have had at any other point during the pandemic. Statewide bed utilization for ICU is at 80%. Now, some of you may be going, well, 80%? That means there's 20% left. That's good. No, it's not good. Hospitals are not staffed to be at 100% capacity. It's not about the beds. Hospitals are staffed to run at 60 to 80% capacity. Well, why is that? Why will they have the 20% extra beds? Because hospitals are part of emergency response. So, for example, knock on wood, we don't want this to happen, but let's say a plane crash tonight down at SeaTac Airport, and 100 people under normal circumstances are rushed to Harborview Medical Center. That is what that extra capacity is there for, that extra 20% for short-term surges. We're not in a short-term surge here. This has been going on since March, up and down, but it's just been going on. And the other challenge you have is this is throughout the country, and we're actually, Jay Inslee said, we're the best in the country for wearing masks. Like, percentage of people are like, I'm going to wear a mask. It doesn't get better than Washington State. We're so friggin' screwed. We're so screwed. And states like Idaho, where chuds are literally threatening the lives and health and safety of 12-year-old children because they don't want to wear a mask. Yeah, Idaho is sending their sick people to our state. Isn't that great? Isn't that wonderful? I say personal accountability. Close the frickin' border in Idaho. You can go figure it out yourself. Why should we have to clean up your irresponsibility and use our precious resources up? Well, that would be very Republican of me, wouldn't it, Mitch McConnell? We talked about this on Monday, but the numbers have gotten worse on Monday. And I know I'm using some of the same spiel that I used on Monday, but it bears repeating for this. We know that the FDA has recommended in a vote, 17-4-1 abstention, to go, why, yes, we're going to go ahead and use the AstraZeneca, not AstraZeneca, the Pfizer, the emergency for Pfizer. That doesn't mean it's approved, but it will almost certainly be approved. Remember, 62,000 doses, 182,000 doses, 2 doses to become immunized, 28 days apart. 28 days after the second dose, you then achieve your 70 to 90% protection depending on the vaccine that you get. And then we have questions on how long of the veracity. We know out of the United Kingdom that there have been a couple of people who have had severe allergic reactions. However, the people that have had severe allergic reactions are people that historically have had severe allergic reactions to other immunizations. There has been no fatalities reported up to this point. And to the Q followers who say crazy stuff like, this is for mind control.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it.
Remember, England has been immunizing a bunch of people in their 90s, so I guess Bill Gates is preparing his mind control army to be a bunch of pre-Alzheimer patients in England who have to wear diapers. Like... The numbers, but they went down. Well, there were almost 2,500 new C disease COVID cases that were identified, according to the latest news in the last 24 hours. So we continue to tick at this 2,500 pace, which means we will continue to tick at adding 130 to 150 patients to our hospitals on the daily. And that is kind of the growth that we're seeing at this point. But look at the death rate. The death rate is down to 1.5%. Yeah, the death rate is down to 1.5% because, wait for it, math.
Chud. Cannibalistic, humanoid, underground dwellers.
Now, I know that math is very scary to you, like especially when it comes to things like counting ballots in an election that your preferred candidate lost by 7 million votes. But let's get into the math a little bit. You don't get a COVID test and then get your COVID test is positive and immediately get teleported to the hospital and then 5 minutes later immediately die. You may get a COVID test and then they may tell you right now what they're telling people, unless they're really sick, is they send their happy butts home. They're sending people home with iPads and oxygen monitors and telling them like how to self-monitor at home and doing the digital check-in. And they're literally doing this because there's no room at the hospital. So what they're basically saying, hey, you get to play doctor and nurse while you're so sick and you can't figure out what's going on. Oh, and by the way, one of the symptoms of this disease is losing your mental faculties if you start getting a bad version of it. But good luck with that. That's literally what they are starting to do in this country with people. Of course, it could be worse. You could be in states like North Dakota or Utah, or in El Paso, Texas, or Amarillo, Texas, or the Panhandle of Idaho, where they're rationing care, which literally means doctors there are deciding who gets treatment and who doesn't. And if you don't get treatment, you die. And that treatment doesn't just apply to people with COVID. That could apply to somebody who has a stroke or severe burns or has had a heart attack. And remember, the heart attack means that coronary artery disease killed you, not the fact that you had cardiac arrest. I don't even know where I was going with all this. I guess the bottom line that I have in going with all this is, for the love of God, wear a flippin' mask. Stop. There's no even sense in saying stop at this point. It is predicted that 45% of all restaurants in the state of Washington will be out of business by the end of next year. 45% of all restaurants out of business. That's Jay Inslee's fault. He should just... No. You know whose fault it is? It's your flippin' fault because you won't wear a piece of cloth over your face. You claim that you don't want to live in fear, but you fear vaccinations, 5G, Antifa, Black Lives Matter, and wait for it, mail-in votes, and Jay Inslee. Yeah. So cut it out with the false bravery, okay? Wear a stinking mask, support the economy, and let Mitch McConnell know he needs to do friggin' something and not do this $2.5 trillion transfer of wealth on the American people. Okay, and with that, because I've got to look here, and I said earlier in the show, the monitor that I have where I can see your comments wasn't cooperating. And I didn't have time to troubleshoot it when it wasn't cooperating. So here we are. So I'm going to have to look here. And mods, what I can do, mods, is I can look on the chat. If there's any questions that are like, hey, you really need to answer this question, go ahead and relay it here for me, and I'll just have this open up in my hand, and it'll be like, yeah, so-and-so asked this. So it's time to go ahead and start asking your questions. I did see somebody say, oh, here we go. My mom died alone of COVID, even though she didn't have it in May. Are you saying that I'm not quite understand. She died of COVID, even though she didn't have it. I'm confused. I'm very, very sorry for the loss of your mom. Maybe you could clarify. I have a feeling there's a story behind that, and I'm just looking for clarification. And it is totally disgusting where we are. And I completely agree that we could have done better. I was reading a story. There's a story in USA Today. It was the cover story this morning about how we've completely dropped the ball. And an individual that they interviewed, somebody in the medical community, an epidemiologist, I believe, who was talking about how they were traveling in early February. And Dr. Mrs. Malcontent and I went through the exact same experience. So when we got on air, and we flew to Africa, she was there on a mission trip. I was going to film a documentary. We actually wore N95 masks on the airplane, and hardly anybody was. And we got a couple of, we were like, why are they wearing masks? And it was her that was like, early information coming out, we should really wear masks. And so we wore masks. And I got to say, at a certain point, we took them off. The other thing is for sleep, I took mine off. When we got into Namibia, that was our first like, whoa, wait a minute. They're really taking this seriously, because when we got to Namibia, they made us stand out, everybody on our plane. We had to stand out on the tarmac. Now, Namibia doesn't have any gates. They're the kind, the airport there in Windhoek, you go down the stairs, you walk across the tarmac, but they wouldn't let us go in. They're waiting for us to go in. Then they had us all go in as a group. What Namibia was doing, where they were controlling so they could identify, okay, this group of people came in on this flight. And here is a nice black woman, attractive woman, and she is dressed in complete PPE. She has got the gown, she has got the gloves, she's got a face shield, she's got 2 masks on, the hair, everything. And there is this like camera set up and a monitor and all. And they made us fill out questionnaires before we landed. This is February 13th. February 13th. Made us fill out a questionnaire before we landed. We had to submit that. I actually had to go into secondary screening because my body temperature was elevated, in part from standing out on the hot tarmac and having 40 plus pounds of camera gear for my carry-on my back, and Dr. Mrs. Malcontent's carry-on and her bag and that bag, because that's how I roll. So they did another temperature check after 5 minutes. They had me sit in some air conditioning. Temperature check 5 minutes later, and like, okay, you're good to go. And when we flew out, it was a similar procedure. And then when we connected in Johannesburg, they were pretty serious in Johannesburg. And when we got to Munich, when we got to Frankfurt, Frankfurt was, they did an announcement, which was, hey, if any passengers on this flight have been to China or Italy and a couple other countries in the last 2 weeks, you need to come up to the podium. And I was like, yeah, because when you come up to the podium, you're not going to be getting on this flight probably. And we were at this point concerned. We're flying back on February 26th. And what's happened, of course, here in Kirkland, what's going on is Evergreen Hospital's filling up with patients coming out of Life Care Center. When we arrived in the United States, our experience was identical to one of the people that was interviewed for this story. No person asked us anything. We went to the automated kiosk to check in. There was no, have you been? There was no questionnaire. What countries did you travel to? We're coming back from Africa, which I guess, of course, isn't as bad as China. And I know that dear leader claims, well, we closed the borders. We saw it firsthand. There was nothing. The other thing was we were not kept in a separate group. We were kept in a separate group in Namibia. We were not kept in a separate group in, wait a minute, we were kept in a separate group in Johannesburg. We weren't when we got to Frankfurt. But we had to go through in a separate group in both of those airports. Not only were we not kept in a separate, we were just able to mingle. It honestly felt like we could have had 2 elephant tusks and 20 keys of smack in our baggage, and they wouldn't have cared. It was just like, you're here. And again, Dr. Mrs. Malcontent is a doctor, and she was horrified, and I was horrified. And we're like, okay, dear leader calls Namibia, countries like Namibia, a shithole country, and yet this shithole country is doing a better job at protecting their borders than we're doing. And for the most part, when you look at Africa's nations, Africa has been more successful. South Africa has been kind of an exception to that, but South Africa has certainly had more success than Brazil, Russia, United States, or India, or Sweden for that matter, in controlling the spread of COVID. I'm seeing all of these comments to Renvell, and Renvell, I know I asked the question, I just like went off on this rant. You've told your story. Can one of the mods just relay her story to me? Could you do that maybe? Like give me the 10 or 15 seconds. And actually I know it's going to take about 20 seconds for one of the mods to hear that, to then relay that to me. I'm seeing all these comments here on saying how terrible it is, so I will express my condolences to you. It's just, if you had told me in May I would be standing in front of a camera in December and going, more people have died of COVID than all of the combat deaths in World War II, I would have told you you're nuts. I was pretty doom and gloom in May. Because I remember when I was like looking at the numbers and doing the comparisons, and I remember when we passed the World War I number. I remember that because we covered that. And, and I said, in my head, I didn't say it aloud, but in my head, because the next one, right, the World War II number is so high. And I'm like, we're never going to get to that number. So the next number, the next one's the Civil War. That's where we're at. And then we're kind of in uncharted territory after that. What about the 1918? Again, they weren't able, so we don't know if it was undercounted, overcounted. We don't have a daily count. We don't know. We certainly know the number of people who were soldiers or affiliated with the U.S. military that died in World War II, because that was documented and cataloged, and they had service numbers on their dog tags, and all of that went through. And if they couldn't find them, then they were missing in action. And if you were a submariner, you were still considered on patrol. That's part for the submariners. That's part of the honor roll and the duty call on there. I'm not minimizing the 1918 flu pandemic, but man, people, when that meme came out that we kind of picked apart, boy, have people gotten wrapped around the axle on that. Probably could have done a 1-hour show. Like, that would be like a cool special edition show. Like, let's talk about Antietam Sharpsburg. Let's talk about the San Cristobal hurricane. Let's talk about Hurricane Maria. Let's talk about the Okeechobee hurricane. Let's talk about the San Francisco earthquake and why the number went from 700 to 3,000 a few years ago. Her mom was in hospice for other reasons. It died alone because of COVID, I believe. Someone please correct that if that's wrong. So I guess what you're probably, here's what I'm going to understand. She was in hospice, not for COVID, but because of COVID restrictions, nobody could go in and see her while she was in hospice, and she ended up dying alone. Boom, I got the right. Okay. So the slowest horse, me, has crossed the finish line. This is a really sad example of the unintended consequences, the suffering that people don't see. You know, there's actually one other thing I want to close on when we're talking about ICU capacity, don't get sick and all of that. One of the things that...
It's a cannibalistic humanoid underground dweller.
What they like to talk about here is more people are going to die from suicide than are going to from being socially isolated than from COVID, right? That is one of the arguments against having the restrictions that we're facing right now.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it.
Mods, because we were talking about the issue of suicide, can one of the mods please put in the comments the telephone number for the National Suicide Hotline? If you are feeling suicidal or if you have suicidal ideation, help is available for you, and you should reach out and seek help. There is no humiliation. It's not something that people are not going to understand. Reach out for the help. Reach out for that. I'm sorry. It's a little gallows laughter there, but reach out for that help. We're going to put that phone number to the National Suicide Hotline because we are talking about a sensitive subject. The most available data that out there for number of suicide deaths in the United States is 2018. We don't have the 2019 numbers yet. That phone number is 800-273-8255. If you are feeling suicidal, if you have suicidal ideation, 800-273-8255, the National Suicide Hotline. Reach out for help. People are there to help you. The most available data that we have is from 2018. Approximately 42,800 Americans died from suicide in the year 2018. That is 42,800 too many Americans who have died from suicide. Tonight, we are approaching 300,000 Americans who have died from C disease. We also know that because we can extrapolate this data and we have comparative data because we can look at a state like Washington, which has the best mask compliance in the country, God help us, versus a state like South Dakota, where the governor there apparently feels that a good reelection strategy is killing off her voters. We also can look at a state like Kansas that left it up to the counties, and the counties that said, yes, by golly, you need to wear a mask, had half of the rate of COVID infections as the counties who said, F your mask, you can do whatever you want to do. And the number of states that are no longer doing mask mandates of some sort, that list is getting smaller and smaller as Wyoming joined the mask club because they actually were exceeding North Dakota in the number of positive tests that we were getting. And right now as a nation, every 22 people are getting tested, one is coming up positive for C disease. We're doing so freaking great in the United States. If we look at 300,000 and we were to eliminate all of all of this stuff, we're just going to go out, go to restaurants, do what you want, rub elbows, do whatever you want to do. A lot more than 42,800 extra deaths in a year is going to happen. There is no denying that the impact of the isolation, the financial ruin, Mitch McConnell and the Republican parties, loss of job, loss of purpose, isolations from family. There is no questioning that this has resulted in widespread depression. And there is no questioning that widespread depression has resulted in the increase of the number of people who will commit suicide and have committed suicide in 2020. But to suggest for 1 minute that that number of the differential between what it was and what it will be in the hundreds of thousands is beyond a ridiculous suggestion. If we as a nation are a group of people that go out that are so sick, our nation ceases to function anyway. Our economy ceases to function anyway. Our ability to defend ourselves as a nation becomes compromised. Think about it. And I'll say it again. If you are having suicidal ideation, help is available, and reach out and get that help. I think we've covered everything that we're going to cover tonight. Here, there's another, actually, let me call this out. Callie C., thank you. 800-682-43, sorry. See, I don't have my other monitor, so I have to do the lead in. 800-662-4357. Again, if you are feeling suicidal, you're having suicidal ideation, 800-662-4357. Get help. No one's going to judge you. It is okay, and it will be okay. Everyone in their lives has had moments where it's 1 minute at a time. And if you've reached the point that you're like, okay, I just have to, I can't get through the next minute. I'm so overwhelmed. It's okay. You're going to be okay. But then reach out for the help. And with that, we're going to go ahead and close the show out. Wear a flippin' mask. Be good to each other. Big story tomorrow. We are still working on the story for the police manual on Antifa and guerrilla warfare. That is a doozy of a read. Can't wait to share that one. Hopefully, we'll share that on Monday. Please be good to each other. Malcontent out. The Malcontentment Tango is a team of journalists, activists, and researchers with 3 key missions. A commitment to show an unfiltered view of the before, during, and after of key events, live as they happen. To defend the First Amendment, using our rights of a free press and to petition the government for redress of grievances. And to amplify the voices of underrepresented individuals, including Black, Indigenous, persons of color, and the LGBTQIA+ community. Our team is committed to seeking equality for all and holding those in power accountable. The easiest way to support us is to like and follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter, Periscope, Twitch, and Instagram. Thank you for supporting independent journalism and for being a malcontent.
You fit the profile. You're the malcontent.
Nobody wants to hear the nonsensical ravings of a loudmouth malcontent.
He said malcontent Antifa. Fuck you.
You are the biggest hypocrite on the face of the planet.
I say that you're a terrible reporter. That's what I say.